I didn't expect to like the Pragmata demo, but getting hands-on with the game has really surprised me. After years of vague trailers, long silences, and almost no real explanation of what this game actually is, combat feels deliberate, slower, almost old school in a way that I really wasn't expecting, like PS2 and PS3 classics. And yet, after playing it, I'm still not convinced the game is going to work. But I'll get to that. First, let's talk about why this feels different and has a lot of potential. The biggest surprise is how tactile the game actually feels. And this isn't a fast, twitchy shooter. It's not trying to be Red Dead in space.
You know what? On second thoughts...
Instead, the combat feels layered. You're not just shooting, you're simultaneously managing positioning, hacking, and survival pressure. Something that Capcom know a lot about. There's a weight to every move and decision. Shots matter, movement matters, which I think is the clincher here, and timing matters too. And in 2026, that basically counts as a radical design decision going against the grain. It almost reminds me of the PS2 era design philosophy, when action games weren't afraid to be slightly slower, slightly more mechanical, and slightly more deliberate. Do you know what I mean? Back then, games expected you to engage with the system and have fun. And Pragmata feels like it wants you to engage with the systems 100%, no distractions. And that's really refreshing. Something some action RPGs could learn from now they transitioned to real-time combat. In a weird way, this feels closer to how I wish some RPGs had handled that shift from turn-based combat to real-time combat, I mean. Instead of flattening strategy into just button mashing, Pragmata builds strategy into the action itself. And that's just awesome. We're hacking while under pressure. We're managing space while enemies advance closer and closer. And the whole time we're not thinking, we're reacting. That balance is really hard to pull off. And so the demo, it just works. But there are a few questions here. So first, does that slower pacing cause a huge risk? Yes, because what can feel really interesting in a demo might feel really repetitive after 15 or 20 hours. And let's be fair, my grandma moves faster than that astronaut guy. And does anyone else get Ludin vibes? The combat feels right now because it's very focused, it's very contained, and it's super tight. But we haven't seen how it scales yet, and that's going to be really important for the full game. Will enemies evolve meaningfully? Will the systems deepen, or will we be doing the same layered routine for the entire game? That's my first concern. A lot of games nail a vertical slice, but very few can actually maintain that complexity without becoming exhausting. There's a fine line between thoughtful pacing and dragging momentum. Right now, Pragmata sits exactly on that line. So the bigger question is about structure and progression. So what have we seen so far? We've seen almost nothing. No narrative depth, no progression systems, and no real world design philosophy. Don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to finding out. Is this going to be a tightly controlled linear experience or something a bit more semi-open? Is it more systems driven or survival? And I'm surprised to see no horror elements considering this is from Capcom and built on the RE engine. And that uncertainty is a bit dangerous when we start to think about, shall we pre-order the game? Because when a game leans heavily into layered combat systems, those systems need to be super strong going forward. And without narrative weight or progression incentives, even good mechanics can start to feel hollow. Am I right? Okay, let's talk about why this game feels old school. Old school cool. The PS2 comparison isn't nostalgia for the sake of it. And I'm not talking about 15 frames per second with a piss filter. There's something structurally different about older action games that I think this encapsulates. They weren't afraid of that friction. They weren't obsessed with constant forward momentum. They allowed slower encounters, and they allowed mechanical complexity, minute to minute. And they allowed awkward awkwardness even. Modern AAA games often sand down those edges, and Pragmata doesn't feel sanded down. It feels a little bit awkward if we're honest, but I'm saying that's a good thing. I like it. But here's the risk. Modern audiences are used to smoother, faster, more streamlined systems. A lot of people just want to pick up and start shooting. So will players stick with something that asks them to think mid-combat? Will this become its own niche? Or will people just label it clunky as fuck? That depends a lot on the execution of the full release, I know. Another concern I have is narrative opacity. So Pragmata has always advertised itself as a mystery. You've got that old homeless woman who looks like she smokes ham-flavored vapes, and the astronaut looks just like a Luden. Shout out to Kojima. But mystery only works if it's intentional and layered. Right now, the demo and the trailers don't really clarify the tone. It's a little bit messed up, and it doesn't clarify the emotional stakes. Although I have seen some people calling it dad space, and potentially a game that is really healing. And this slower, more deliberate combat would pair really nicely with an emotional weighted story, don't you think? Let's just hope it doesn't feel completely empty. So with all these pros and cons in mind, I'm not negative on this one. I'm just being cautious. And there is a difference. The demo proves there's a lot of intention here and that the combat isn't generic. And I really appreciate devs that go out their way to make a self-contained demo instead of just like a 2-hour trial. I think it shows the devs have balls the size of oranges. It's not just copy-pasted AAA design. They're trying to do something new. Respect. But their intention doesn't guarantee quality. So guys, we need to look out for meaningful enemy variety, clear progression systems, narrative grounding, and mechanical evolution. If those elements land in the full game, this could be something genuinely distinct. And if they don't, it risks becoming one of those games people describe as, yeah, interesting, but I didn't play it myself. Pragmata surprised me. It feels different, it feels deliberate, it feels designed, not assembled. But we've only seen a slice. What are your impressions of the demo? Have you put in your pre-order? Do you have the same concerns as me? Let me know in the comments and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.